Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and welcome to a very special, unscripted, improvised, those mean the same thing, Taliesin Talks, where today we are talking patch 8.3. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hang on Taliesin, I saw you talking about patch 8.3 on the last episode of the Weekly Reset yesterday. It was entertaining and informative, thank you. Why are you talking about it again now? Well, that's a very good question and I'm glad you asked. Yes, if you watched the Weekly Reset, in that episode yesterday, which by the way I spent all weekend working on, I do speculate that I think this would be the week where Ian Hazakostas or Jeremy Feasel get on one of their lovely streams and tell us all about patch 8.3 at last and let us know what's going on. And if there's one thing you know about me, Internet, it's that I love being right. And that's exactly what happened. 2 hours after the Weekly Reset that I spent the entire weekend working on came out, Ian Hazakostas went on stream and revealed patch 8.3, the visions of Ny'alotha. And that's great. I love being right. It's really good. I'm very excited about the patch. But screw you, Ian. Could you not have waited 3 hours? Maybe a day before you brought out that stream and completely destroyed all the views on that video? Thanks very much. I can't stay angry at you, Ian. I can't, because of your lovely, beautiful, innocent face, but also because I'm very excited about this patch. And already there's loads of data mining and exciting things to talk about, which we will on the Weekly Reset. Things like the reward updates and the death of Titan forging, haha, supposedly. The new allied races, which we correctly predicted. No one else did, though, just us. Only we predicted these allied races. The Goblin and Worgen heritage armor with top hats. The auction house overhaul, there's new raid sets and mounts and super secret data mined broadcast text between various characters giving away lots of the story, and you know how I love that. That is all for the Weekly Reset. That's what the Weekly Reset is for. We're going to gather it all in one place and discuss it in an informative and educational way. But that's not what this video is for. No, this video is just a little bit more personal, because ever since Ian released this information yesterday, people have been contacting me on Twitter en masse wanting to know what I think of it. And there's a reason for that. It's not because they all look up to me and I'm like their wow messiah, although I am. No, it's a bit more personal than that. It's because if you are a regular viewer of this channel, you'll know that about 11 months ago, just over, we released a video where we predicted that Ny'alotha would be the location of patch 8.2 and Ny'alotha would be the location of patch 8.3. Something that obviously turned out to be right, but all those messages on Twitter weren't just to congratulate me on being right, although I was totally right. No, if you've watched this video, you know that I spent the last 5 or 6 minutes about it basically just talking about how much I've always wanted to go to Ny'alotha. If I could choose any place in the mythos of World of Warcraft, Ny'alotha is the place I would choose. So not only did I predict Ny'alotha patch 8.3, but I was hoping for it. Hope beyond hope. Fingers crossed, praying that this would happen. And I was convinced it would, that's why I predicted it. But you'll also know that Blizzard, for some reason, have been keeping their cards incredibly close to their chest when it comes to 8.3, not wanting to tell us anything about it. And as you know, when you don't tell people the real information, then people are going to talk, then people are going to speculate, and then people are going to come up with other information that might not be the real stuff. And that's exactly what happened with 8.3. Supposed leaks coming from 4chan. Yeah, 4chan. But leaks that have been taken incredibly seriously by the community at large and some very big important YouTubers and streamers, to the extent where it's now considered almost fact that the things in these leaks will be happening. To the extent where, even though I predicted Ny'alotha as patch 8.3 11 months ago, a prediction which makes perfect sense, we weren't the only ones to predict it, loads of people got there, even I was starting to think, you know, so many people think these leaks are right. Maybe they are. And out of all of these leaks, the one that has inspired the most YouTube content is the Shadowlands leak, with this very impressive looking map, which I'm not saying isn't legit, by the way. I'm not saying that the idea of going to the Shadowlands next expansion won't happen. That's not what I'm saying at all. But part of this leak very specifically highlights things that would happen in 8.3. 8.3. And the thing is, the reason we've never made a big video on this leak is because I knew it was false from the second I saw it, and I'll tell you why. The last boss of BFA was indeed shown in the Ashara defeat cinematic. It seems meaningless, this line. It feels like the least important part of this sentence, but it's how I knew this leak was false straight away. The last boss of BFA was indeed shown in the Ashara defeat cinematic. Now, that is a misquote of me, which is how I know it's false. When Evitel and I went to the 8.2 Creator Summit in Anaheim, and we got a chance to talk to developers and Ian Hazakostas, he told myself and Evitel and the other creators gathered there that at the end of the Eternal Palace raid, we would know who the final boss of BFA is. And it would be obvious, and we'd just know. And of course, we reported that on our channel. We said that Ian Hazakostas told us that by the end of the Eternal Palace raid, we would know who the final boss is. Therefore, we think it's Ny'alotha, because we've looked at the Dungeon Journal and we know that that final fight against Ashara is all about releasing Ny'alotha. That's what we said. If you want proof, it's this video here. 8.2 reveals the final boss of BFA. You can go and see it yourself. 5 to 6 months old, that video. That's how long we've known that Ny'alotha was going to be the final boss of this expansion. But here's the thing. It was only to us there at the summit that Ian said that. That's not an official Blizzard statement, and after we reported it in our video, that's kind of been spread across the internet, and internet Chinese whispers has kind of morphed that into some people saying that we will see the final boss of the expansion at the end of the Eternal Palace raid, which is of course not what was said. And so when this says the last boss of BFA was indeed shown in the Ashara defeat cinematic, straight away I know this is a false leak, because that was not something that Blizzard ever said. And if this leak was coming from someone that worked for Blizzard, they would know that. It seems like such a tiny little thing, but for me, that's how I knew that this leak was completely false from the off, and it's why we didn't make any videos about it. And it turns out we were very right not to, because let's see what else this leak says about patch 8.3, which, by the way, we know about now. It's much more metaphorical than people realize. The last boss is us, Alliance and Horde. Bullshit. Indicated by the last shot of Jaina and Lorthamar, Ashara and Ny'alotha are both bosses in the next expansion. Bullshit. We won't be facing them again, at least physically, in BFA. Bullshit. Sylvanas will prepare a strike against Thunderbluff. Bullshit. Tricking both the Alliance and Horde into defending it. Bullshit. During this distraction, she will invade and conquer Stormwind. Bullshit. The latter will be explained through a comic released in October. That hasn't been disproved yet. It has always been the plan to finish this expansion with a raid version of Stormwind. Bullshit. Therefore, patch 8.3 includes a 10-boss raid. Bullshit. Within Elwyn and the city itself. Bullshit. Along with a complimentary all-new 40-player battleground. I guess we'll wait and see. In the raid, Horde and Alliance players fight alongside important lore characters and leaders from both factions. Probably true. Sylvanas has already taken Stormwind at this point. Bullshit. The raid is about defeating Sylvanas and reclaiming Stormwind. Bullshit. The first boss is a sort of caravan escort scenario. Bullshit. The second boss is Old God aligned. That's actually true, and has enslaved city gut. Bullshit. Another notable boss is Anduin. Bullshit. Halfway through the raid, he will succumb to the whispers of Ny'alotha. Bullshit. The 8th boss is Nathanos. Bullshit. The encounter takes place in Cathedral Square. Bullshit. Tyran decapitates him at the end of bullshit. The penultimate boss is Sylvanas. Bullshit. She awaits us in Stormwind Harbor. Bullshit. And then, you know, some more bullshit. So as you can tell, pretty much everything that the Shadowlands leak says about patch 8.3 is total bullshit. And the question, therefore, needs to be asked. If this much of it is bullshit, why on earth would you believe any of the rest of it? Now, here's the thing. I wouldn't be surprised if Shadowlands is the next expansion. I wouldn't even be that surprised if this map turns out to be legit. But this, ladies and gentlemen, is not a legit leak. And furthermore, if you are excited about Shadowlands and you're hyped for that, then the fact that this definitely isn't a real leak shouldn't spoil that for you. It's okay to accept that this leak is complete and utter bullshit, but still be hyped about the idea of Shadowlands' next expansion. That's absolutely fine. But this, ladies and gentlemen, is not 8.3, because this is 8.3, the sleeping city of Ny'alotha, a 12-boss raid fighting through a Black Empire city where we fight Ny'alotha. twice, but also assaults and horrific visions. And this is actually the main content of the entire patch, because though I have long prayed for the Ny'alotha N'Zoth Old God patch, though people were congratulating me that this is the patch that is happening on Twitter all of yesterday, though I was skipping around with excitement because finally the patch I've asked for my entire life is here, it's a bit different from how I would have done it. For a start, there's no new zone. Now, when I thought of Ny'alotha, I pictured it as being like Argus, basically, going to a whole new place. This grand, vast, unknowable, unexplorable, huge city built on a scale that us mortals couldn't even understand, with steps and platforms that are just too big because they're not made for people our side, stretching off into the vast horizon with crazy weird architecture which we can't really appreciate perspective of because again it's not built to our scale. And I pictured it being quite a lot like Argus, where we went to different parts, maybe a different zone of it every week, and played through, you know, quite involved storylines with maybe world quests and things happening around it. A good solid 0.3 patch like one would recognize. What Blizzard are doing instead is incredibly interesting and maybe quite brave, and I don't know how it's going to work out. And after playing it on the PTR, I'm still not entirely sure. The main new feature, assaults, are quite recognizable actually. You travel to Uldum or to the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, which by the way is now fully restored when there's not an assault happening there, and like happened in Legion and in BFA with the faction assaults, is being attacked by N'Zoth's minions. So there's new architecture there, the sky is all purple and dark, there's old gods like generals and slimes and infestations that you have to destroy, fill up a bar. Within each of these assaults there's also a gateway to a nightmare, and by killing enemies in one of these nightmares, before your insanity meter reaches 0, you will gain a currency which can then be used to buy entry into the main everyday gameplay feature of this expansion. There are two horrific visions, a void-corrupted Stormwind and Orgrimmar, and Blizzard compared them to the Mage Tower, although really they're much more like the Chromie scenario or the Withered Training in Legion. They are 1 to 5 person scenarios where you'll go in and again you have an insanity meter which ticks down just by time and damage that you take while you're there, and you've got to kill baddies. There are various different sections of each city which you can go to and clear out for other rewards. So for example in Orgrimmar there's a bit where you can help Zappy Boy rescue captured shaman who are being corrupted by the void. And like Withered Training, the more that you can complete all in one go, the more rewards you'll get, and those rewards will help you the next time you go in there. Like the Chromie scenario, there's a whole new talent tree that you level up with currency that you get from killing enemies in these horrific visions, which will help you only in the horrific visions. So the idea being that you'll never complete it on your first attempt, but the more you're able to grind it, the more you're able to complete it, the easier it gets to completing it, until eventually you're in a position where you can beat the grand final boss of those horrific visions, Alleria in Stormwind or Thrall in Orgrimmar. And like I say, I've played all of this on the PTR and they're really good features. The assaults themselves, as mentioned, are incredibly recognizable. They follow the same format as those Legion assaults or faction assaults, and at the moment they feel incredibly empty. They're not populated as much as you might think. There's no events or world quests in and around them at the moment, and you've got to imagine that those will be added, and if they can become as exciting and as varied as the faction assaults, then I'll be very, very happy with that. Because the main event in those assaults for many will be the nightmares that you go into to get that currency so you can try and get into the horrific visions. In much the same way that you would farm nether shards on the Broken Shore to gain access to the Mage Tower. Except not quite. The first time you want to enter a horrific vision, and you do so through the Chamber of the Heart, it's going to cost you 400 of these currency items, which, okay, isn't that big a deal. But of course, you're not going to get very far on your first go. The second time you want to go into one of the horrific visions, it's going to cost you 400 of that currency. The third time you want to go in, it's going to cost you 800, and it keeps doubling right up to 1600, which is a couple of days' work at the very least just to earn an attempt in one of these horrific visions. Unlike the Mage Tower, that not only was the same price all the way through, but actually gave you a free attempt every day. Now, I'm assuming that that 1600 figure resets every week or maybe even every day, but we don't know that yet. It'll be really interesting to find out. And if, like Ian says, this really is the main feature in this content patch, that is a lot of work to put into what could be a very quick attempt. But in principle, I really like them. I really like that people can do them solo. That's incredibly important. I really like that I can go in with a group of friends if I want. That's definitely what I'll be trying to do. And of course, being in Orgrimmar or Stormwind, which is completely taken over by the Void, with Void corrupted citizens and lore characters there, going into Stormwind Cathedral and having a fight with Alleria as she sends Void bolts at you and you have to hide behind the columns and things like that is undoubtedly awesome. Is it enough to keep me going in what promises to be a fairly long patch? I don't know. I'm assuming a lot of it will have to do with what the rewards are. And it might sound like I'm being a bit harsh here because, of course, when 8.3 arrives, there will be story quests. Even to set up the Assaults and the Horrific Visions, we're going to have to team up with Rathian for a bit, get the legendary cloak that gives us access into the nightmares, and be leveling that as well. Presumably, there's going to be other story going on too, but this is the repeatable bread and butter content. Presumably, a little bit later comes that new raid, Ny'alotha. And it's when I look at this, it's when I look at the footage that was shared in Ian's stream of the sleeping or now awakened city, this is when I start getting really excited and almost kind of like annoyed at what could have been, because this is everything I've ever wanted. That crazy, huge, obscene architecture. Like, you look at some of these shots and it basically is a recreation of that gorgeous page from Chronicle that shows the Black Empire city, right down to the huge tentacles in the sky. This is what I wanted a zone of. And seeing it as a raid is incredibly exciting, has got me completely hyped. I can't wait to go in there with my raid and just spend time in this incredible place. Is it enough? If this raid really is us doing Ny'alotha, then I don't feel cheated, but I just feel like I want more. I want more of this incredible architecture. I want more of the Black Empire. And I don't know about you, but having Ny'alotha as this patch and fighting N'Zoth twice at the end of it makes me feel like, I don't know, maybe next expansion is less likely to be Black Empire themed. Maybe you disagree with that, but maybe you disagree with that. People on my stream certainly didn't. And granted, I haven't done story quests. Granted, I did just go and do these assaults and then have a shot at Horrific Visions. And granted, I haven't even set foot in the raid for raid testing. And granted, this is the first day of the PTR, but Ian did say he wanted to hear our feedback on these things, so here it is. At the moment, if this is the Ny'alotha patch, the patch that I've been waiting for my entire WoW life, then I just want more of it. And I'm not sure comparing it to other expansions is useful, but I think it might be relevant here. If you look at patch 7.3, when we went to Argus, there was a sense of traveling to a new, exciting place. There was a sense of discovery and adventure, and that sense isn't quite there in these things. Partly, I think, because we're using the old world for them. It's awesome and cool to see Stormwind and Orgrimmar fall into void corruption. It's amazing to see the Vale of Eternal Blossoms taken over by agents of N'Zoth. But these are still places that we know. There's nothing alien about them. There's no sense, really, of being on someone else's turf. They, after all, are assaulting us, not the other way around, like we did with Argus. And I feel bad criticising it at all, because the assaults and the Horrific Visions are good, they're fun, they're good content, but I got a sense playing it, it felt like pre-patch content. It felt like something that was warming us up for the main event. And granted, that main event is, I guess, the raid, Ny'alotha, but if that is our only experience of that amazing Black Empire architecture, that feels like such a waste, doesn't it? And of course, if it were a pre-patch, then the main event would be opening the way to the Black Empire that we could go to and explore. I want to explore the Black Empire city. Super dangerous though that would be. I want to investigate its nooks and crannies. You can't really do that in a raid. That's not what it's for. Personally, I wouldn't mind seeing a dungeon in there as well. Got one of those in 7.3 as well. Imagine a Ny'alotha dungeon just to set up the events of that final raid, where we make our first strike into the Awakening City, just to see what's going on and get our heads around it and work out what it even is before we go in for the raid. I don't want to give the impression that I'm disappointed in 8.3, because that couldn't be further from the truth. The entire the aesthetic and the feel and the philosophy behind the raid is everything I could have ever wished for. The assaults, and particularly the Horrific Visions, are good content. And like I say, it is literally day one of the PTR. I'll be really excited to see what gets added to it going forward. And you know, I don't want to excite you about something that might not happen. I'm determined not to be excited about myself, but there has just been the slightest whispers in some of the darker recesses of the data mining community that suggest that maybe, just maybe, there is something else. Something that Blizzard haven't mentioned. Maybe they're saving it for a bigger reveal later on. Maybe they'll talk about it at BlizzCon. Who knows? It's probably nothing. It's probably better if you forget I even mentioned it. And anyway, there's far more to 8.3 than that, all of which we will be looking at in very excited tones in the weekly reset. And I just wanted to come on here and let you know my initial reactions to this patch and everything that it represents, because I know that people were excited for me when they saw it, because they knew how much it would mean to me, and it really does. I was like a kid at Christmas all last night. I came in from meeting my friend at the pub. Evitel had been an orchestra, and I was reading all about it. I was so excited. I was like, yes, at last it's this. And about 1 a.m. I went to bed, and then at about 10 past 1 I had to get up because I was just pacing around the flat reading about it even more. It excited me that much, and so I'm fully accepting that I am probably far too invested in this patch just from an aesthetic and a thematic point of view, because the old guys, ever since I got that puzzle box of Yogg-Saron which mentioned Ny'alotha, the city of unnumbered crimes, it's held this really magical place in my heart, and I've been waiting for this for so long, and as such I'm going to be simultaneously incredibly easy to please and impossible to please when it comes to this, so just fair warning ahead of time. But what do you think, guys? Is 8.3 what you were hoping for? Are you hyped for it? Could you even come back to the game for it if you stopped playing in BFA? From what you've seen, is the Ny'alotha, N'Zoth old god theme being properly realised, or are you disappointed at a lack of a new zone and a dungeon? I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts on this, so let us know in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today for this stupid Taliesin Talks. If you like this video, don't thank us. Thank our patrons who give their actual real-life money to make all of our work happen. Without them, there'd be a whole lot less Taliesin Evitel. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Martin Benjamins. No, my name is Taliesin from me and Evitel, until the weekly reset, where we'll be talking about all of the new models and mounts and armor sets and allied races and Titan forging and the whispers of Il'gynoth. Until then, cheerio.